Now see in what order its artificially accelerated transformation will proceed. Having said this, he first fixed before my organ of sight the automatically moving Tescahuano, and then turned on and off various switches in a certain sequence. And as I looked through the Tescahuano, he explained to me as follows. At this moment, I admit the influx of all three parts of Okidanoch into the sphere containing this metal. And as all three parts have the same density, and hence the same force of striving, they reblend into a whole in this sphere without changing anything in the presence of the metal. And the omnipresent Okidanoch, thus obtained, flows in its usual state through a special connection out of the Harha Hartzaha and is reconcentrated in the first container, which you've already seen. Now look, I deliberately increase the force of striving of only one of the active parts of the Okidanoch. For example, I increase the force called cathode nautius. In consequence of this, you see that the elements composing the presence of that red copper begin to evolve towards the quality of the substances that compose the ordinary presences of planets. As he explained this, he at the same time turned on and off various switches in a certain sequence. Although, my boy, I then looked very attentively at everything proceeding, and everything I saw was impressed in my essence, pesto nutiarli, that is, forever. Yet, nevertheless, not even with my best wish could I now describe to you in words 100th part of what then proceeded in that small fragment of a definite intraplanetary formation. And I will not try to put into words for you what I then saw, because I have just thought of a possibility of soon actually showing it all to you, when you also can be an eyewitness of so strange and astonishing a cosmic process. But I will tell you meanwhile that there proceeded in that fragment of red copper something rather like those terrifying pictures which I occasionally observed among your favorites on the planet Earth through my Tescahuano from Mars. I said rather like, because what occasionally proceeded among your favorites had a visibility only possible of observation at its beginning, whereas in the fragment of red copper, the visibility was continuous until the final completion of transformation. A rough parallel can be found between the occasional proceedings on your planet and the proceedings then in that small fragment of copper. If you imagine yourself high up and looking down upon a large public square, where thousands of your favorites, seized with the most intense form of their chief psychosis, are destroying each other's existence by all kinds of means invented by them themselves, and that in their places there immediately appear what are called their corpses, which, owing to the outrages done to them by the other beings who are not yet destroyed, change color very perceptibly, as a result of which the general visibility of the surface of the said large square is gradually changed. Then, my boy, this subsequent essence friend of mine, Gornahor Harharch, by means of switching on and off the influx of the three active parts of Okidanoch and changing their force of striving, also changed the density of the elements of the said metal, and thereby transformed the red copper into all the other also definite intraplanetary metals of lower or higher degree of vivifyingness. And here, For the elucidation of the strangeness of the psyche of the three-brained beings who have taken your fancy, it is very important and interesting to note that while Gurnjieff Harhark was, with the aid of his new invention, artificially and deliberately producing the evolution and involution of the density and vivifyingness of the elements of red copper, I noticed very clearly that this metal was transformed once upon the said plate into just that same definite metal about which the sorry savants of your planet have been wiseacring during nearly the whole of their arising and existing, in the hope of transforming other metals into this metal, and thus constantly leading astray their already sufficiently erring brethren. This metal is called there gold. Gold is no other than the metal we call partsatalaber, the specific weight of which, reckoning from the element of the sacred Theomertamalogos, is 1,439. That is to say, its element is 3 and a fraction times less vivifying than the element of the metal red copper. Why I suddenly decided not to try to explain to you in detail in words all that then took place in the fragment of the said red copper, in view of my suggestion of the possibility of soon actually showing you in definite intraplanetary formations the process of various combinations of the manifestations of the active parts of Okedanach, was because I suddenly remembered the all-gracious promise given me by our all-quarters maintainer, the most great arch-cherub, Peshtivogener. And this all-gracious promise was given me as soon as I returned from exile, and had to present myself, first of all, to his all-quarters maintainer, the arch-cherub Peshtivogener, and prostrated myself to produce before him what is called the essence sacred Alia Mezur Nakalu. This I had to do on account of the sane sins of my youth, and I was obliged to do so because, when I was pardoned by his unibeing endlessness, and allowed to return to my native land, certain sacred individuals decided to demand of me, for any eventuality, to have performed over my essence this sacred process, in order that I might not manifest myself as in the days of my youth, and that the same might not thereby occur again in the reason of most individuals dwelling here at the center of the great universe. You probably do not know yet what the sacred Alia Mizur Nakalu over an essence means. I shall later explain it to you in detail, but meanwhile I shall simply use the words of our dear Mullah Nasruddin, who explains this process as giving one's word of honor not to poke one's nose into the affairs of the authorities. In short, when I presented myself to his all-quarters maintainer, he deigned to ask me, among other things, whether I had taken with me all the being productions which had interested me, and which I had collected from various planets of that solar system where I existed during my exile. I replied that I had taken almost everything except those cumbersome apparatuses which my friend Gurnjieff Harhark had constructed for me on the planet Mars. He at once promised to give orders that everything I should indicate should be taken at the first opportunity on the next trip of the spaceship Omnipresent. That is why, my boy, I hope that everything necessary will be brought to our planet Caratas, so that when we return there, you will be able to see it all with your own eyes, and I shall be able to explain everything in detail practically. And meanwhile, during our traveling here on the spaceship Karnak, I shall, as I have already promised you, tell you in their order about my descents there to your planet, and also about the causes of what is called my appearances there in person.